This lecture deals with the first section of American history, dealing with period 1, which begins in 1491, the year before Columbus arrives. This is dealing mostly with Native American civilizations prior to European contact. In this image, you can see what an actual Native American village might have looked like. You can determine a couple of different things from this. First of all, you can see on the right-hand side, it's from the New York Public Library, so these are most likely Native Americans who were in the Northeast. They are sedentary. They have homes that are more permanent than other Native Americans. They have agriculture. You can see it's organized. You can see some sort of culture down in the lower right corner that they're dancing, fires being burned. Lots of things that you might not have thought of Native Americans. And the idea here is that their civilizations were far more complicated than most Americans believe at this point. And they're very diverse. To say Native Americans is really inappropriate because it's this monolithic idea that they're all the same. Just this one image can kind of show you they are not all the same. They depended on the land, yes, but different types of Native Americans depended on the land differently. They had an advanced culture and advanced political system just like the Europeans, just with some different resources available to them. Now contrast that with this image of what will be colonial America, or it could even be a European town, but as you can see, the Library of Congress, it's probably colonial America. You can see a complex society, different buildings, personal ownership. You don't see agriculture here, but you can probably tell that there's some sort of agriculture going on to feed these people. But what it shows you is both societies, European or European colonists and Native Americans, depending on where they were, had different complexities of society and some similarities within them. So if we take a step back here, the founding of, or the forming of the planet is kind of what leads Native Americans to come here. In the present form of Earth, it was very slow. It started out as Pangea, where all these continents were one. Then it breaks away into the great continents: Eurasia, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, and the Americas. There are majestic ranges of in the western North America with the Rockies, the Sierra Nevada, the Cascades, the coastal ranges, all formed in addition to the Appalachian Mountains more towards the East Coast. So the big kind of idea here is that what's going to shape both colonial America, all European colonists, and Native Americans far before any of the Europeans get there is the environment, and how it is formed shapes kind of how they live their lives. So the way it is shaped, North America, that is, the Canadian Shield, which was a zone of ungirded, or which was ungirded by rocks, becomes part of the North American landmass. Mountain ranges formed along with rivers and valleys, and as these glaciers from the Ice Age move downward and melt, they do form valleys, they do form what will eventually be rivers, but they also kind of shape some of the rock faces of some of our mountain ranges. So what these timelines show you is American history is relatively small compared to all of history. So recorded history begins about 4000 BC. Jesus was born between 4 and 8 BC, and then the first successful English colony in Virginia is 1607 AD. And then when you look at a wider range of American history from Columbus to the year 2000, it looks like a longer timeline, but it's actually significantly smaller in the amount of years. And this is all post-European contact with Native Americans. There's a whole lot going on between 4000 BC and 1492 AD that's going to shape Americans' lives far before, or Native Americans' lives far before the Europeans get here. So the first humans crossed over land to get over to the North American continent. There were low sea levels during the Ice Age, so the connection between what is today Russia and what is Alaska and other parts of Canada were connected. So Eurasia and North America, where the Bering Sea now lies, could be connected. This brought the immigrant ancestors of Native Americans. The first people to come over here came over from Asia generally during the Ice Age. So the first immigrants to North America were Native Americans. So you see on the top of the map the Bering Land Bridge, which is connecting Eurasia, specifically Russia, to Canada and Alaska. They came down through Canada. Some of them stayed up in Alaska and Canada, like the Inuits, and they went to different areas of North and even including South America. What led them to make choices about where they went? Generally, it was food. Most of them were following some sort of animal that they were eating, so they went where the animal went, and that's kind of how they all spaced out. So the Incas in Peru, the Mayans in Central America, and later the Aztecs in Mexico shaped complex civilizations. So they had elaborate cities. They had big commerce, big economies. They were talented in mathematics. They offered human sacrifices to their gods. So they had complex societies, much like Europe. Again, different resources, so they won't be able to have things like horses until the Europeans bring them over, or guns, or things like that. But they did have complex societies, including infighting. So the Aztecs were disliked by a lot of the smaller tribes that they will eventually conquer in northern and southern Mexico, including the Mayans. The Incans were the same way. So when people from Europe do get here, specifically the Spanish, and they start to want to take down the Aztecs, they are not the only ones there who want to do that. Many of the other Native American tribes felt the same way. So it's very complex. It's not simple that all these Native American tribes are the exact same. And you can see here where the story that Columbus did not know that America was there when he's sailing for the Indies, you can see where that gets some idea here, because you can see the shapes of in the center of the page, or the center of the image, of South America and North America, obviously not drawn to scale, not what it really looks like, but they did know it was there. Columbus is not even the first European to get there. Leif Erikson, the Chinese had, there's some evidence that historians argue that the Chinese had gotten to the West Coast early on. So people knew that this continent and these continents were here. They just didn't quite know what they offered in the shapes of them. Obviously, the Native Americans had far more knowledge of that, being the ones who lived here. So in Mexico and South America, corn becomes the staple crop for many civilizations. They had large irrigation systems that were created. They had multi-storied terraced buildings, and there's all different areas of what showing this complexity in their agriculture and in their society. They had different gods and different religious entities, and you can see here corn is essential to their life in this image. And this is a very important map because it shows present day North America, and it shows all the different tribes that separated with her in the southeast, northeast. So to say Native Americans, well, you really have to concentrate at least in the region that you're talking about. The southeastern Native Americans are going to be very different than the northeastern or Great Plains, the Great Basin. All these different groups are very different from each other, and it shapes their lives. Very few of them, besides the Aries and the Great Plains, lived in teepees and hunted bison and things like that. The Northeasterners, Southeasterners, people in California, were generally sedentary and generally had agriculture. So there's lots of different complexity going on here, and most of it, again, is shaped by their whatever their climate, whatever their the environment was around them. So what is also important to realize is because there are so many tribes, that kind of keys you into the fact that these people did not all get along, and there was competition. So there's the idea in history called the noble savage, where before Europeans got here, Native Americans had a better way of life. Well, no, they had wars and they had things for competition for land or money or whatever was valuable to them as well. So social life was less elaborately developed than in Europe. That was mostly because they did not have the resources available, so they had to focus a lot more on getting resources. They didn't really have nation states, again, unlike Europe, except for the Aztec Empire. There were mound builders in Ohio River. The Mississippian settlements was at Cahokia. So there were different types of organizations here, not as advanced as Europeans, but it's definitely important to realize that they weren't as savage as what a lot of the Europeans painted them as, and what a lot of early American historians painted them as well. So most Native Americans that practiced some sort of agriculture did three sister farming, which was around maize, beans, and squash, and it supported dense populations, enough relatively easy to grow, enough food to sustain a large group of people. The Iroquois Confederacy, so there's the Iroquois Nation that is one organization, but the Confederacy eventually kind of develops and creates other institutions as well and other organizations, not just the Iroquois, other Native American groups. The natives had neither the desire nor the means to manipulate nature aggressively, so they used nature for what was necessary. They didn't manipulate it aggressively, partially because they couldn't, partially because they were getting what they needed to as is. That does not mean had they had the resources and technology that Europeans had, that they wouldn't have manipulated aggressively. They probably would have, because they are still humans. And finally, this image just kind of highlights the fact that they are shaped by their agriculture. This large civilization is from the Cahokia, the Mississippian Valley. So you see the Mississippi River and different river systems that they built around. So highlighting the idea that they are based on whatever the environment is. You can see in the lower left-hand corner that there's some agriculture going on, that three sister farming, the maize, the beans, and other things, but you can also see the large expanse. Organization is clearly in this settlement. It's advanced. There's some sort of center group, whether that's for or center building, which is probably a religious institution, and which also serves as a political institution, which we'll see as early Europeans get here and later in the English colonies, they will do the same things. So some big ideas here. Natives were far more complex and far more diverse than a lot of people believe, and they were shaped by their environment just like the Europeans will be, and later the Americans will be later on in history.